Let us let us begin. Today's page is Daf Ayin, and we are holding. Let's just move it over here. Okay. Okay. Let me just make it smaller a little bit. Okay. We're holding about one line from the top. Goyla Sefer Torah. So, um, so we learned that um, the if we remember the Kohen Gadol, a very important part of his service was that he had to read he had to be the Bal Kriya also. He had to learn from the Sefer Torah, Parshas Achrei Mos, and he also had to learn also the Parsha of Emor. And the third thing he had to learn was Parshas Pinchas, the Musafim, the extra karbonos that were brought besides for the Avodas Yom. There were extra karbonos brought because of the Musaf. So the Mishnah said that from Parshas Achrei Mos, he would read it, and then he would roll the Sefer Torah to get to Parshas Emor. Then he would read that, but then he would not roll the Sefer Torah. He would go right away and read Parshas Pinchas by heart. Right? He would read Parshas Pinchas by heart, and he would tell the people that don't worry, the Sefer Torah is a kosher Sefer Torah. It's just that I don't want to read it inside anymore because it'll take too long till I roll the Sefer Torah to the right place. So he tells everybody the Torah is a kosher Sefer Torah. That's what the Gemara says. The Mishnah says V'goyla Sefer Torah, and then he reads Parshas Emor. And then after reading Parshas Emor, hi Steve, we just started. After reading Parshas Emor, he makes the announcement, and says, this is a kosher Sefer Torah. V'kol kach lama. Why did the Kohen Gadol do that? Kidei shlo hoitzi laz al Sefer Torah. Not to cause a rumor about the Sefer Torah. That people will say that the previous Sefer Torah that you read from was not kosher. That's why you're not reading from it inside. No, he's going to say the reason why I'm not reading inside because I don't want you to wait till I roll the Sefer Torah. That's what he said. And then and the Parshas Pinchas, the part of the service that's written in Parshas Pinchas, which is the Musaf of Yom Kippur, he reads it Ba'al Peh. We'll just take a look at that. Here's the reading in Parshas Pinchas where it says Bikra Kodesh, it tells you all the karbonos, parechad, ayelechad, seven sheeps. We're going to come back to this. It's a very important part of today's daf. So the Gemara says, Amai. Here's the good question. Why do Niglol v'nikre? Let him roll the Sefer Torah to Parshas Pinchas and read it. I mean, you sometimes come to shul and the Sefer Torah is not in the right place. You roll it. So that says, Amar Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yehoshua, Amar Rav Sheshes. He said, that's not respectful. You don't roll a Sefer Torah while the tzibur is waiting. We do not roll the Sefer Torah in front of the people because of the respect for the tzibur. You see, you have to be prepared. And since it would take too long for the Kohen Gadol to start rolling the Sefer Torah, let it read it by heart. So the Gemara asked a simple question. Let him bring another Sefer. There was no shortage of Sefer Torahs like we sometimes on Shabbos take out two Sefer Torahs. And so let him bring another Sefer Torah and read it. So there's two terutzim why we don't do that. First teretz is Rav Huna bar Huda Amar Mishum Pagamai Shel Rishon. People will say that the first one, the reason why we're bringing him a second Sefer Torah is because there was something wrong with the first Sefer Torah. Even if he would announce that, there's nothing wrong with this first Sefer Torah, they're bringing me another Sefer Torah, so you shouldn't have to wait while I roll and have it right here. People are not going to believe him. So therefore, he has to read it by heart. He's going to make a bracha that's not necessary. In other words, since he can read it by heart, right? So technically, you don't really need another Sefer Torah. And if you bring him another Sefer Torah, he's going to make a baruch. Now, I want to point out, like we're so familiar with somebody, like we have Mondays and Thursdays and Shabbos, you call people up to the Sefer Torah and everybody makes a bracha. Here on Kippur, on this service, it was just one person called up to the Torah, the Kohen Gadol, and he had to make a bracha. So and make a bracha before and make a bracha afterwards, like a regular aliyah. Now, if you force him to read from two Sifrei Torahs, he's going to have to make an extra bracha on the second Sefer Torah. And that's not necessary. Since he could read it Baal Peh, we do not bring the second Sefer Torah. Says the Gemara, Umi Chashin Lipagama. Are we always concerned that people are going to say that the first Sefer Torah was no good? That's why we never bring two Sefer Torahs. You only learn from one Sefer Torah. So that if you don't bring a second Sefer Torah, so people should not say that the previous Sefer Torah something was wrong. That's not true. This is a story every day. Parshas Miketz, which is the middle of Hanukkah, Rosh Chodesh Teves, Shecholias b'Shabbos, that falls out on Shabbos, Mevian Shalosh Torahs. They bring three Torahs. They take out the Korin Achas. One of them is Binyan Yom. One of them they read the Shabbos portion, which is usually Parshas Miketz. The Achas Shalosh Chodesh, and one of them they read the Parshas Chodesh. Rashi Chodshechem Takriv Oil Hashem. And the third Sefer Torah Shal Chanukah. They read the Parshas Nesiim, which you read on Hanukkah, which is the reading on Hanukkah. So we see we're not afraid to bring out many different Sefer Torahs. So why in Yom Kippur are we afraid to bring out more than one Sefer Torah for the Kohen Gadol? So the Gemara answers, Tlosa Gavre Betlosa Sifrei Leike Pagama. On a regular shul, where you're calling up three different people in three different Sefer Torahs. So nobody's going to say the first Sefer Torah something's wrong. People are going to know that this is another person, and therefore the previous Sefer Torah was kosher, and we have another Sefer Torah because we're calling up another person. But by Yom Kippur, where it's one person, the Kohen Gadol, and causing him betray Sifrei to read in two Sefer Torahs, that looks strange to the people. Ika Pagama, there's a possibility that people will say that the reason why the Kohen Gadol is reading in two Sefer Torahs is because the first one was not kosher. And we don't want people to mumble around to say that the first Sefer Torah was not kosher. So we only have for the Kohen Gadol to read in one Sefer Torah. But we have the different problem. If he reads for one Sefer Torah, it's going to take time for him to twirl the Sefer Torah to get to the right place in Parshas Pinchas after reading Parshas Achrei. Therefore, the Mishnah says he reads that Baal Peh, by heart. Okay. Then, after he finishes the reading of the Sefer Torah on Yom Kippur, the Mishnah says, "Umavarech al alel shmeina brachas." You make 8 brachas after this reading. We're used to reading. So, what are those 8 brachas? Okay, so he just finished reading. Okay, he finished the laning. Tanu Rabbanan. He first bracha he makes is ala Torah. Kederech shemavarchem beveis hakneses. You make the bracha like we always make, the after bracha, after you finish Aliyah, you say, Asher Nosum Lanu Torah Emes, V'chaya Olam Nota B'Zechenu, like a regular person making the basic knesses. That's bracha number 1. Al Havoida. Then you talk about a bracha, special bracha that you bake on that talks about Hashem should return to their service to the Beis Hamikdash. Val Ha'idah. That the service should be, accepted by Hashem. Val Haidah, and a bracha of thank you. Val Mechilas Avoin, and a bracha about God should forgive the sins of the Jewish people. Ki Tikuna, all these brachas are connected. In other words, each bracha doesn't begin with a new bracha. It's like the Haftorah brachas, that they're all connected, or Shemoneh Esrei brachas, that therefore you don't have to make a Baruch Atah Hashem by each and every one. But for the base, there's another bracha which you make for the Beis Hamikdash, that God should continue to rest His presence in this Beis Hamikdash. That's a separate bracha. And Hashem should listen and save the kahanim for on any tzara that could happen during the year. Val Yisrael b'fnei atzman, and the Jewish people, he makes a bracha by themselves. He makes a bracha asking Hashem that Hashem should not bring any problems to the Jewish nation as a whole. But al shar tefillah, and then he makes another prayer. What is that other prayer? Tanu Rabbanan u'shvar tefillah. This is what he says. Rina, it should be God should be praised. Tchina, we are begging him, we are beseeching him. But kasha, we're requesting him. Milfanecha alam Yisrael, every person of the Jewish people should tzrichin lehivashea, that needs a specific help. So the final bracha that he makes is a prayer that should a Jew find himself in an ace problem and he has a needs of Yeshua, God should listen to his tefillah. So those are the 8 brachas that the Kohen Gadol recites after the reading on Yom Kippur. Then the Gemara says, the Brisa says a very strange thing. And afterwards, every Jew that was in the shul of in the Ezras Nashim and heard the Kohen Gadol read, maybe Sefer Torah mebeisei. He already had a Sefer Torah from his house. Now you're not allowed to carry on Yom Kippur, but he already brought from Erev Yom Kippur his own personal Sefer Torah, and the Kohen he would himself read the Parshas Achrei Mos. Now, why did they have to read? Every person have to read from their own personal Sefer Torah. They didn't really have to. They'd probably be yotze with the reading they heard from the Kohen Gadol. But Kedei Laharis Chazusay L'Rabban, each one was showing off how beautiful their Sefer Torah is. There is an inyan to beautify mitzvahs, and there's an inyan that if you buy a Sefer Torah to have a nice cloth, a nice ink, it's a nice size. So everybody came to show the Chavivas HaMitzvah that they also have a Sefer Torah from home. I don't know why they specifically did that on Yom Kippur, but the idea of everybody bringing their own personal Sefer Torah and not relying on somebody else is to show how much they appreciate mitzvahs and how much they beautify personally their mitzvahs that they do. The Mishnah said, Haraya Kohen Gadol, there are two things going on at the same time. One thing that's going on is the Kohen Gadol reading in the Ezras Nashim. He's reading like we saw over here. He's reading from the Sefer Torah. But there's another thing going on at the same time. Remember that outside the camp, there's a big fire going on. And there are people around as the Kahanim are burning the par and sa'ir that there was part of the service of the day, the cow and the goat. So since it's very far apart, they can't, and they're being done at the same time. People, for one, could not go to see the service of the Kohen Gadol, and if you were with the Kohen Gadol, you couldn't see the service of the burning because they were far apart. So the Gemara says, Pshita, what is the Mishnah teaching you? Of course, if one is done, a mile away, of course you can't, and the service is being done at the same time. Of course, you can't go from one to another. So the answer is Mahu the same Rish Lakish. The Amar Rish Lakish ein mavira ala mitzvahs. I would have thought that if they were close enough, you would still not allowed to go from one place to another, because there's a concept is that once you're involved in one mitzvah, you're not allowed to go do another mitzvah. You're not allowed to pass over a mitzvah to do another mitzvah. So if you're involved, let's say, hearing the Kohen Gadol read on Yom Kippur from the Sefer Torah, I would have thought that you're not allowed to walk out and go see the burning of the Par V'Sa'ir, because you're involved in the mitzvah of listening to the Kohen Gadol read the Torah. And if you're by the fire, you're involved in the mitzvah of watching the Par V'Sa'ir being burnt. You're not allowed to go to the reading of the Kohen Gadol. So I would have thought, my mitzvah, what could the mitzvah? Because it's very important to be part of the crowd, because the more of a crowd, it's a more honor for the king. In other words, when mitzvahs are done in a big crowd, and you're part of that crowd, so you're part of the mitzvah. So you would not be allowed to leave from one mitzvah to the other mitzvah. I would have thought, Kamash Malam, that you would be allowed to leave from one mitzvah to the other mitzvah. If there was a way to get from one place to another place very fast, you would be allowed to leave. Because at the end of the day, you're not doing the mitzvah. You're just an observer to the mitzvah. And therefore, you would be allowed to leave from one mitzvah to another mitzvah. Okay, now comes the new Mishnah. Now, I want to point out, let's just review one thing, which is very, very important. Okay, if you could look at the screen, I'm just reviewing. The Torah says in Parshas Achrei Mos that, again, the Kohen Gadol should take a par for a chatos and ayil, a ram, for an oila. That's part of his service. And for the Jewish people, he takes 2 seirei isim lechatos, 2 goats, which we know one goat is for the Azazel, one goat was for seir pnim, and the Jewish people also take va'ayil echad la'oila, and 1 ayil for another oila. Let's just highlight that. Va'ayil echad la'oila. This is another ayil for the oila. And then, if you go to Parshas Pinchas, the Torah says that what? You should take a par ben bakar, you should take 1 bakar echad, ayil echad, 7 cows, and 1 sir izim lechatas, and this is besides the chatas HaKippurim, This is beside the service of the day, the Chatas HaKippurim that we discussed before, the Parachod, the goats, and V'oilas HaTamid. So I want you to clearly get what's going on over here. At the end of the day, if you follow along, there are 15 slaughterings that the Kohen Gadol did. So he had to be a real strong person. 15 karbonos he did that day. Let's review. He did the keves, the sheep, in the morning. He did the keves, the tamid, of the afternoon. And then he had also did the musaf. Par echad la'oila, ayel echad la'oila. And then, so that's 3 and 4. And then he brought 7 sheeps. And then he did a goat for a chatas. So that's just, we're up to number 12. And then we saw what he did in the Beis Hamikdash, the service, the extra service, besides the musaf, the karbonos that's written on Parshas Achrei Mos, the par of the Kohen Gadol, the ram of the Kohen Gadol, the so'ir panimi. I'm not counting the so'ir la'azazel because he didn't slaughter that. But basically, he slaughtered 15 animals that day. Now, what is the order of the day? So I want you to clearly. So once you see this, you'll get what the Mishnah is talking about, and everything will fly. So let's see just a point, and then we can do the Mishnah. Rab, when do you do the musafs? That's the question. What our Mishnah is dealing with is, when are you going to do the musaf? Obviously, Rab Lezer is going to say, in the morning, everybody agrees you do the tamid and the ketara shel shachar. I'm pointing over here and you do it with the gold tvila rishon. You go to the mikveh, and the big days of you do the tamid shel shachar. But then, according to Rabbi Lezer, you do the regular service of the day, the par, the sa'ir, sending the sa'ir to Azazel, the sa'ir achatas, the parachatas. You do the k'taris in the kodesh kadashim. Then, by the third time you go to the mikveh, you do the 2 aisles. The Kohen Gadol had his own aisle, and the people had his own aisle. Remember, we saw over here that there's an aisle. The Kohen had to bring a ram, and the people had to bring a ram. Now, the people's ram was also part of the musaf, but we'll talk about that soon. Then they brought the insides of the chatas apnimius on the mizbeach. Then he went to the mikveh again to obviously take out the spoon and the shovel that was still in the kodesh kadashim. Now, at the end of the day, when he got back on the 5th time he went to the mikveh, according to Reb Lezer, he put on the gold clothing and brought the musafs. He brought the musaf, the 7 cows, and another goat that was Sarya Nasa B'chutz, and then he did the Talmud Shabbein Abayim, and then he finished up the job with lighting the menorah. Rabbi Akiva is going to say, no, the musaf, the 7 cows and the 7 cows, that you did it right away in the morning. Talmud Shel Shachar, right away. Afterwards, you did the musafs. And there's going to be a reason why Rabbi Akiva says you do it in the musaf. Then, after he did the 7 cows and he slaughtered 7 times, then he does the service of the day, which is the par and the sa'ir and the ketoris and the kodesh kadashim. Then you did the sa'ir hamasafim, that extra goat from the musaf, and then that was also part of the musaf. And then you did the ayal and the ayal om, and then you did the bringing up the fats of the avodas hayom. And then you ended off the day with taking out the kafel machta, and then you did the tamid and ketoris Shabbein Rabbayim. So the difference between Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Akiva is, you have to just remember, according to Rabbi Lezer, the 7 cows, most of the musaf was done at the end of the day. According to Rabbi Akiva, the musaf was done right away in the morning, before you started the service of the day of the ketoris and the parva sa'ir. Let's read the Mishnah very quickly. If the Kohen Gadol was reading the Chumash, doing the Sefer Torah, reading it with the linen clothing, Kiddush Yadav V'Raglav, Poshat, he took off his linen clothing, Yarav V'Tava, all of in his stabek, he went to the mikveh, he dried himself off, if he leave like big day Zahav. V'Lavash V'Kiddush Yadav V'Raglav. So this is the 3rd time he's wearing the big day Zahav. So according to Rabbi Lezer, in middle of the day, towards the afternoon, he does v'yatsa v'asas ele ves el ha'am. He does the ram and the ram of the people. V'shivas hakvasim tmimim b'nei shana, and he does the 7 cows. Divri Rabbi Lezer. So again, according to Rabbi Lezer, after you do the big day lovin, the service of the day, you put on the big day zahav. You did the elish el ha'am, right? The Mishnah doesn't say this, but you have to in between take out the kafel machta. We're going to see that he missed that. And then at the end of the day, you do the musaf. So it's like a hodgepodge over here in the Mishnah, but that's what Rabbi Eliezer means to say. Rabbi Kiva says the real musaf was done in Tamid Shel Shachar Hayakreim, was done in the morning. Para Oila, and the Gemara is not so, but Para Oila was also probably done in the morning. The par ha'oila, the par that was part of that musaf, was also done in the morning. But the extra sa'ir that was part of the musaf, the last sa'ir, like we say over here, but the Torah tells you besides another goat. So there's a basically a third goat over here. One goat went to Azazel. One goat was brought l'fnai v'l'fnim. This is called the goat that you makriv on the mizbeach hachitzain. According to Rabbi Akiva, that was done in the afternoon. That only that was done in the afternoon. Then the Mishnah says, okay, you finished the whole service of the day. Kiddush Yadav Uraglov, it depends. Upashat V'yarad V'taval, he went to the mikveh, V'olav and Istapeik. Hevi Eloi Big Day Lovan V'lavash. They brought him one more time the Big Day Lovan, and he put it on again. Okay, so this would be the third and final time he puts on the white clothing. Kiddush Yadav V'raglav. Obviously, every time he takes off the clothing, he does, before he takes it off, he does Kiddush Yadayim V'raglayim. When he puts it on, he does Kiddush Yadayim V'raglayim. Total of 10 times during the day, he's doing Kiddush Yadayim V'raglayim. And why did he put on for the last time the Big Day Lovim? Because it was not nice to leave the spoon and the shovel into the Kodesh Kedoshim. So Nichnas, he went back into the Kodesh Kedoshim, Lahaitzi as a kafas amachta, to take out the spoon and the shovel that was left inside the Kodesh Kedoshim and take it out. And when you take it out, so that's why it's clean, it doesn't stay there till next year. Kiddush Yadav V'raglav Pasha V'yarav V'tavel. He did Kiddush Yadayim V'raglayim, took off the white clothing, went to the mikveh for the final time. All of it is stopping, he dried himself off. Hevi Eloi Big Day Zahav. They brought in the gold clothing. And the Lavash Kiddush Yadav V'raglav, he again did Kiddush Yadayim V'raglayim after he put it on. And what did he do for the last thing? So he brought the Tamid Shel Ben Abayim, the Nichnas, the Haktik, the Torah Shel Ben Abayim, Ulahativ his neiros, and light the candles and finish up the day. And that was the end. That probably took him till Ni'ila, whatever. Then after he finished all this, V'kidash Yadav V'raglav, Pashat, Heviloi Bigdi Atzma B'lavash. After he did all that, he did Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim, took off the gold clothing, and he put on his regular suit. And he went home. Umalabin Oise Ad Beisai. And the whole Jewish people would escort the Kohen to his house. V'yomtiv Hoya Oise Loyahav. That night, he made a Sudas Yomtiv for his friends. To celebrate that the fact is that he did this service of the day, and nothing happened to him. He came out, b'shalom, he's still alive. So the Gemara just wants to clarify what exactly is Rab Lezer. Rab Lezer was missing things, and Rabbi Kiva was missing things. It's not clear from the Mishnah, so to speak. Until the Gemara brings a clear brisa of the order of the day of what Rab Lezer holds, and a clear brisa of what Rabbi Akiva holds. What did Rabbi Kiva say when he said upara oila? Does Rabbi Kiva hold in Tamid Shel Shachar Hayakreivim that the para oila goes with the Tamid Shel Shachar, the sa'ir hanaseh bechutz, but the sa'ir, the goat of the musaf, that was done later on the afternoon in Tamid Shel Ben Abayim, or maybe this is what Rabbi Kiva says in Tamid Shel Shachar Hayakreivim. It was meant that they brought with the Tamid Shel Shachar, they brought also para oil bahadei. Not that the para oil, I'm sorry, in the previous thought, the para oil went with the Tamid Shel Ben Abayim. No, this way we could say the para oil went with the Tamid Shel Shachar, and the only thing that he did in the afternoon was v'soya nasim chuz in Tamid Shel Ben Abayim. That's one question. V'su para oil Rab Lezer deshaye emis avidle. Rab Lezer makes no mention of the para oil. Part of the musaf is not just 7 sheep; it's a cow for the oila. Besu Beil Rabbi Lezer, Beil Rabbi Kiva, Emura Chatas Emet Ovalu. Even Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Kiva, when did they bring up onto the mizbeach the fats of the par hachatas that was brought in the Kodesh Kedoshim, the blood that was sprinkled in the Kodesh Kedoshim, and that was burnt outside, and the seir hachatas that was lefnim? When did they take those insides? That we know he put it into a klisharis. When did he throw it on the mizbeach hachitzin? So it's not clear from the Mishnah what exactly is the order of the day. Amar Rava la mishkachas la kanta ela. You don't find it set up correctly. Ela oy Rab Lezer detana be Rabbi Shmuel. only the version of Rabbi Lezer which is taught in the yeshiva Rabbi Shmuel, or the Rabbi Kiva Ketosefta, or you find a Tosefta which has Rabbi Kiva more elaborate and more clear exactly what's the order. The Tana Bei Rabbi Shmuel. Okay, I'm gonna go inside, and this is very clear of Rabbi Elezer's opinion. I just want to bring it up again so it's very clear. Rabbi Elezer said right over here. This is Rabbi Elezer. Right away in the morning with the gold clothing, he brings the Tamid and the Tamid Shachara and the Neiros. Then he puts on the white clothing and does the lottery and the Avodas Apar and the Ksoria Nasa B'fnim and the Azazel. Fine. By the third time, he does the ram and the ram of the people, and then at that time he brings the Eimrei Chatas Apnimis, the fats of the Avodas Hayoim. He puts that on the Mizbeach Hachitzin. Then he goes back to do the big day love on to take out the spoon, and then he goes back to the big day Zahav to do the rest of the Musaf, okay, which was the 7 cows and the other extra goat for a Chatas. Clear? So now let's read it inside. Rabbi Elezer Omer, Yotza, on the third time, he went out after he finished the service of the day. He's now in his white clothing. He went out and changed back into gold clothing. And he did Eloi, his own personal ram, the El Ha'am and the ram of the people, the Emurei Chatas and the fats of the Chatas that were brought in the Kodesh Kedoshim, the sprinkled in the Kodesh Kedoshim. He put all that, he did that and brought that on the Mizbeach Hachita. Then, what did he do in between? I'm going to tell you what he did in between. Then afterwards, he changed back into the white clothing for another time. And what did he do? He took out the spoon and the shovel that was in the Kodesh Kedoshim, turns back into the gold clothing. And there, when he's back into the gold clothing, he finished off everything. Avapara oila, the shivas kvasim, the soria nasa bechutz, the cow of the musaf, the 7 sheep from the musaf, and the so'ir that was part of the musaf. He did that in Tamid Shabbein Abayim at the last part of the day, with the right before the Tamid Shabbein Abayim. That's how, according to Rabbi Lezer, the order of the day is. Again, the total is 15 karbonos, 15 slaughterings that he did. Rabbi Akiva, I'm Tosefta Himai, but Rabbi Akiva has a different opinion, and it's more clear in the Tosefta what his opinion is. The Tanya we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Akiva Oima. Let's look at the page again to clearly get it. Let's look at Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva agrees that you start off with the Talmud Shachar. Everybody agrees to that. But then he says, at that moment, you do the Musaf, except for the Sa'ir. You do the power of the Musaf, the 7. Right away, he starts off with a bang in the morning. 7 cows of the sheep and the Musaf. Then he does the service of the day, like Rabbi Lezer. Then he does the Sir HaMusafim. By the third time, he does the Sir HaMusaf and the Eloi She'el Shalom and the Emorei Chatas. And then just in the afternoon, all he did was the Tamid Shabbein Abayim. That was the only thing that he did in the afternoon. So Rabbi Kiva says it's more intensive in the morning. That's the difference between Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva is a morning person, so it's more intense in the morning. Par ha'oila, the par of the Musaf, the Shivas HaKvasim, and the 7 sheep of the Musaf. In Tamid Shel Shachar hayakreim. That was done in the Tamid Shel Shachar. Now, what is the reason of Rabbi Akiva? Shenema, because the pasuk says, "Milvad oilas haboika asher oilas hatamid." The Torah tells you that when you do the Musaf, do it after the oilas hatamid. So right away after the oilas hatamid, the Torah tells you do the Musaf. That's why Rabbi Akiva says do the Musaf right then and there. And then Rabbi Akiva says you do the Avodas Hayom, you do the service of the day. We turn to Amud Beis. Then you do Eila ve'Eila Shel Am, Achakach Emurei Chatas, V'achach Soria Nasa Bechutz, because the Torah says, the Torah told you, according to Rabbi Akiva, to do first the Avodas Hayoim, and then do the Sa'ir of the Musaf. That's the point. Really, the Sa'ir of the Musaf could have been done like the rest of the sheep. Do it in the morning. The answer is, but the Torah says the Sir Izim Echad Chata should be done after the Chatas HaKippurim, after the goats, the first goat, the Chatas HaPnimi, then you did the extra goat of the Musaf, and then you did everything else. Now let's go over here of the Gemara. Again, Rabbi Eliezer says you do everything in the afternoon. My time is the Rabbi Eliezer. So why did Rabbi Eliezer say you do the Musaf in the afternoon? Why didn't he hold like Rabbi Kiva? You do it in the morning. So the Gemara says, Ovid Kidiksev. He does it like the Chumash. The Chumash starts Parshas Achrei Mos. So you do Parshas Achrei Mos, And then when you finish doing the service of the day, then you go on to Parshas Pinchas. So very simple. Ava Bereisha the Torah's Kahanim. First, you do what's written in the Sefer Vayikra, which is Parshas Achrei Mos, and then V'hada Ava the Chumash Pekudim. Then you go on to do the Musafs in the afternoon, very late in the afternoon, which was written in Parshas Pinchas. Rabbi Akiva, why does Rabbi Akiva give the reason? He says the reason why you do the Musafs right away in the morning is Keduktani time it, because I have a reason. The Torah says, right after you do the oilas atamid in the morning, do the other oilas, the other musaf oilas. Alma, so from the posik is mashma, musafin im tomat shal shachar avilhu, that the musafs were done with the tomat shal shachar. Now, although that posik, bilvad oilas aboika, was not written on Yom Kippur, it was written by Shalosh Regalim, but we're applying it by Yom Kippur too. That right after they do the tomat shal shachar, do the musaf. Don't do the service of the day. Do the musaf. And that's Rabbi Akiva's opinion.
Bernard, what happened to, where does Tadir Veino Tadir Kodum come in?
Very good. So the truth is not Tadir because the Musaf is different for Yom Kippur.
Right, it's not the same Musaf. It's the Yom Kippur Musaf.
By name, correct. It's called the same.
So that's how Rabbi Elazar would explain it.
Right, but he says just look at the Chumash. Parshas Achrei Mos comes first. Do the whole service of the day, and then do Parshas Pinchas. But Rabbi Akiva has a pasuk. So, but Rabbi Elazar, Milvad Chatas Akipurim Mai Oved Lehi. There's another pasuk besides the Chatas Akipurim. You should do the Sa'ir Hanasa Bechutz. So that means it's mashma from that pasuk that the Sa'ir Hachitzain comes before the Eloi Shel Ela Sha'am. So, according to Rabbi Akiva, the question that the Gemara is asking, if you look at Rabbi Elazar's role of the day, and by the way, in the Nachzer, I believe we paskin like Rabbi Akiva. So if you read the Machzer, it's written like Rabbi Akiva. But Rabbi Elazar has it a little differently. Now, the question that the Gemara is asking, why does he put the So'ir Hanasa B'chutz right over here? Right over here. The Torah says that right after you do the So'ir Hanasa B'fnim, the Torah says, do the So'ir Hanasa B'chutz. That's the Gemara's question. According to Rabbi Elazar, put this Sa'ir over here, right over here, before you do the El Sha'am. That's the Gemara's question. The Torah says, where does the Torah say that? Look at the pasuk. Sir izim echel chatas. Bring a goat for a chatas, but do that right after you brought the goats, the chatas Kippurim, the goat that you brought in the Kodesh Kedoshim, do that right after. So according to Rabbi Elazar, how come you didn't do the Sir izim right after? So that's the Gemara's question. Rabbi Elazar, hi melbad chatas Kippurim by overlay. And for the Gemara, this is what you need that for. It teaches you something else. It teaches you that the So'ir Hanaseh Bifnim comes to be Bechaper for something similar that the So'ir Hanaseh Bechutz. The So'ir Hanaseh Bechutz of the Musaf came to bring atonement for a person that went into the Beis HaMikdash, did not know he was Tameh, and then he finds out later that he was Tameh. So there's no carbon for that. It's not your fault. You didn't know that you were Tameh, and somebody told you, oh, by the way, you stepped over a caver. You shouldn't have gone into the Beis HaMikdash. That's what the Sa'ir Hanasa B'chutz was mechaper. So that pasuk teaches you that the Sa'ir Hanasa B'fnim is mechaper for a similar thing, which is the opposite case. A guy knew before that he was Tameh, forgot that he was Tameh, and never knew again. So he walked into the Beis HaMikdash, and he didn't remember that he was Tameh. So he totally forgets it. So he gets a kapara that's just hanging in the air until he remembers. If he never remembers, this is the kapara that the Sa'ir Hanasa B'fnim will provide forgiveness that he knew first and never knew again. So he did the Avera and never found out he did the Avera. So that's what that pasuk is teaching you. It's not teaching you the order of when to bring the Sa'ir Hanasa B'chutz. One more point, and then we'll stop right over here, which is it's a good point. We just had, very simple, we just had the Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Akiva. There are two more versions of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yehuda's version of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Elazar's version of Rabbi Akiva. We said Rabbi Akiva said that our version is that you brought all 7 sheep in the morning. But Rabbi Yehuda's version of Rabbi Akiva was that you brought one of the sheep in the morning, and then you brought the rest of the sheep in the afternoon. And so you brought one over here, and you brought 6 at the end of the day. That's what we're going to learn right now. And Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon, had a version of Rabbi Akiva just the opposite. He did 6 over here and 1 over here. Now that's pretty strange. The Torah says bring 7, and now you're splitting it up. Split 6 over here and 1 over here, or 1 over here or 6 over there. So let's see. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Huda, Mishmoy, Echad, only one of the sheep, Karavim Tamid Shashacha. He said, Rabbi Akiva, his opinion of what Rabbi Akiva said was that one sheep you brought in the Tamid Shashacha, and 6 were brought with the Tamid Shaben Arbayim. And Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, Mishmoy, Shisha Karavim Tamid Shashacha, the Echad in Tamid Shaben Arbayim. So 6 were brought with the Tamid Shashacha, and 1 was brought in the afternoon. So either 1 in the morning and 6 in the afternoon, or 6 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. So the Gemara says, why do these two opinions say Rabbi Akiva split it up? My Tamai the Rabbanim. Why do they say that Rabbi Akiva split up the sheeps? I mean, they both agree to that. So the Gemara says the reason why you split the sheeps is Treik Sroik Sibi. It says 2 psukim. Ksiv Milvad Oilas Haboika. The Torah tells you that right after you do the carbon tamid, you should do the musaf. Okay. But there's also a pasuk that says that in the middle of the service of the day, Yotza v'asas oilosai. In Parshas Achrei, the Torah says he does his musaf. In the middle of, after doing the avodas hayoim, he brought a musaf. So one pasuk says do the musaf before the avodas hayoim, and one pasuk says first do the avodas hayoim and then do a musaf. So therefore, hilkach to satisfy both psukim. Ovid minai hacha, you do a little bit of the musaf here, umanai hacha, and you do a little bit of the musaf in the after the avodas hayoim. So therefore, one said you do 1 and 6, and the other said you do 6 and 1, but you split them to satisfy both psukim by putting the avodas hayoim in between. So the Gemara says, "B'mai kimikalge." What's the argument about? So a very interesting argument. Rabbi Yehuda says you're going to bring 7 karbonos, right? So you can bring 6 in the morning. It's better to do it in the morning, because in the morning he still has strength. So let him do it in the morning. Rabbi Yehuda Sava Ovet Chad, I'm sorry. He says do 1 in the morning. To Ksiv Milvad Oilas Haboika. V'hoder Ovid Avodas Yom. And then do the service of the day. We don't want to tire the Kohen Gadol out doing 6 musafs right away in the morning, and then he should do the service of the day. The Kohen Gadol will become very weak and not perform the service of the day properly. So we just be yaitse to yaitse. We do 1 sheep in the morning for the musaf, do the avodas hayoim, and then late in the afternoon he'll get a second wind and do the rest of the musaf. But we want him to be with his full energy when he does the avodas hayoim. Rabbi Lazar, but Rabbi Shimon said no. Kaven the aschel. Since you start him off in the morning, Ovad Shisha, we want him to do 6 right away in the morning, because Dilma Pasha, because maybe he's going to be negligent to do the musafs. In other words, he'll do the avodas hayoim and think to himself, I did the most important part of the day. I did the kodesh kedoshim work. So he's not going to do the service of the musafs properly. The regarding the service of the day, going into the kodesh kedoshim, the ketoras and everything, and sprinkling the blood, Zorasi, he's diligent about that. Musaf is just like every yontiv a musaf, so he's not going to be diligent of that. So that's why, according to Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Kiva's version is you do 6 of the musafs right away in the morning to get that out of the way and do that properly, and then you do 1 later on. But again, this is the basic machlokes of the order of the day. Again, our opinion is Rabbi Akiva's opinion, that not what you think. He didn't start right away doing the service of the day. He did the musafs right away. And according to the way our version of Rabbi Akiva, he did all 7 sheeps in the day. The only thing that he did in the afternoon after the service of the day was the so'ir of the musaf. That he did after the avodas hayoim. So very, very important machlokes to remember, and it depends how this is the source of how they develop the tefillah and the machzor. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank
very
you.
good.
Shakar.
Everybody.
Good to know.
Thank you.